Okay, hi everyone, it's Yap and Carolina again. Today we're going to continue on from what we were talking about last time, where we were discussing the modes of the mind. Now, just to begin with, to give us a bit more of a contextualization, last time, Yap, you said that the mind is a meta-engine and the modes are its pistons.
Yeah.
Now, can you explain a little bit more what you actually mean? What are the pistons to the engine?
Well, I'm just trying to give you a metaphorical picture of the mind and equating it with the idea that it's an engine, an active engine in the mind, a metaphysical engine. And the pistons, the pistons in an engine are the pistons that pump up and down, that drive the engine once the engine is ignited, the pistons. So I've just sort of, coloured it in that fashion. The modes are like the pistons in the engine of the mind.
So is it that the modes are the component parts to an overall structure that is the mind?
Well, the modes sort of are the template for the engine. The modes give us the template, the architectonics. They're the architecture for the mind, for the engine. Like I said, the engine is just a metaphor. I'm trying to picture it that way. I will explain more about the engine in the mind as we go along. Right now we're discussing modes and so on.
But just to take another example, just to make it absolutely clear. So let's take a banana, okay? A banana is composed of skin and banana meat. Let's call it that.
Yeah.
Right. So is it that the engine, right, is the banana, but its modes are the component parts, the skin and the meat?
No, I don't see it that way at all. It's think of an engine in a car, okay? It's a framework, it's a tool designed to drive the car, to activate the car. Yeah, to put it into action, to mobilize the car, to put it into motion. So the mind, our mind is sort of, we're just sitting there, we're sitting in a meditative state, say, and we want to engage with the world. We want to engage with all the different fields, all the different spectrums of thought. Yeah, so we have to engage with those spectrums. And the modes I talk about are which, allow it to activate itself, to engage with, to extend and expand into. Okay, the mind is now intuitively extending into a field, say, we're looking at the field of capitalism, say. So we have to extend and expand into it. And we expand along all its inference points, all the points that we find reference with that give us the idea of a capitalist system and so on. So I always think of the engine, the mind, and it's an engine because it's systemic. The mind we see through a systemic lens. And that's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting to, and we have a couple of more of these sort of streams to make before we get to the end one. Okay. And I can explain it all then in more detail.
Okay, I might just stay a little bit longer on this point because I think it's important. So could another metaphor be that the mind is a toolbox and it's the toolbox, but the modes themselves are the tools within the box?
The modes are the tools within the box, yeah.
Okay.
The spanner for picking up the nut. Okay, the phenomenology is the spanner and the ontology is the nut. And we have to understand how the spanner not only picks up the nut, but actually fits the nut. Okay, so the phenomenology of the mind has to be circumscribed around the ontology of the nut.
But at the same time, there's a driver in your perspective.
There's a will, the logos. There's something about our nature that's driving forward. Something about us that feels conscious, that is driving forward, that is willing itself forward, and the logos is built in, the idea that we can move forward and be creative. Okay, so... And it's been driven by something, and that drive, because it's been driven, I class it as an engine, okay? And that's all. I just used a metaphor to try and paint it. It's very hard. I'm trying to establish a framework for the mind. I'm trying to show people a template for the mind, a systemic template, to finally show them the mind and how it sees this reality. So I'm building it up around modes and metaphors, basically.
Yeah. Would you say then, final point on this, would you say then that you could describe it this way, that the mind is a toolbox within which there are tools and a human being picking up the tools and using them? So it's both the tools and a driver, basically, within that.
Yeah, I get that. Well, the driver and the tools are one and the same thing. Okay, the ghost is the bag of tools. The ghost in the machine, is the bag of tools. I'll get to that, like I said,
Okay, brilliant. Well, I found that very helpful. So in any case, yes, we're going to go back to the modes. So last time we spoke about circumnavigation, adding, transposition, engagement. Evaluation.
Yeah.
And essentially, these are the tools of the mind, as we've been speaking about. Today we're going to talk about a few more tools, a few more modes.
Yeah.
And I think we're also going to try and open up the conversation a bit more to try and see them in application.
Okay. Yeah.
So let's start with categorization.
Okay, to categorize.
Yeah.
Well, as a species, we have, like I said, we have an evaluating eye. Okay, we have a navigational eye. Okay, we circumnavigate all spectrums of thought. And we add ourselves on, we add upgrade spectrums of thought and so on. And so we categorize everything. Okay, we're able to put things into categories, into classifications, so we can study them of their own accord. So we can classify the body in terms of having a chemistry, that's a category of chemistry, having a category, a biological category, okay, a physical category, a metaphysical category. Okay, the metaphysical category is a transcendental category that suggests a spiritual category. So we can categorize. And our ability to categorize is, part of the seeing eye. The seeing eye navigates, the seeing eye evaluates, and the seeing eye categorizes. Okay, so the engine categorizes itself. We categorize everything. We categorize man and woman in relation to God. We categorize the universe. Okay, we categorize God as something being metaphysical, something beyond us, outside of us, and something inside of us, and so on, something within. So our ability to categorize allows us to control, like the categories are like the pages of the universe. Each category, chemistry is a page of the universe. Spirituality is a page of the universe. It's category, it's classification, okay? Yeah. And it allows us to read it because we can't read, we have the feeling of the universe as being oneness, as a unified field, so there's a unified category, okay? But to understand that category, to actually evaluate, to navigate that category, we have to break it down into subcategories. Okay, we have to break it down slowly to find all the categories, all the different layers that make up the total resolution of what God might be, what the universe might be.
That's really interesting. So I mean, that makes me think. Okay, on a very basic and simple note, you have apples and pears in front of you.
Yeah, categorized as fruit.
Right, they're categorized as fruit, and if you go into the denomination of fruit, you can compare. One is yellow, one is red, one is round, one is long, and you're like, okay, so this is that category, and that's the other category.
Yes. And we can also categorize them as molecular. Okay, the banana and the orange and the apple all have a molecular structure. We bring them all back, and then we can categorize them as having a quantum field supporting them. So we lose the formation of apple, banana, or an orange. Okay, so we're back in a metaphysical field. Okay, because reductionism takes us back down into the quantum field every time we look at anything in the field of matter. So categorization, like I said, is a very broad lens.
Yeah, so that's actually what I wanted to talk about, because there can be danger in categorizing unknowingly, let's say. And not danger, but...
It's like a genocide.
Okay.
To categorize people as less than. To categorize people as Jews and German and white Aryan races. Okay?
Fact, yeah.
And so, I mean, like we were saying, let's look at the categories and how they can be used just in an ordinary everyday way, if you like. We'll take racism. We'll take a racist. If you have an opinion of somebody else being less than because of their skin pigmentation or because of their ideological beliefs, say, an ideology can be substandard, but that doesn't mean the person is substandard. So there are people who believe others are substandard. Let's just say that. So they categorize the person as substandard. Yeah. Okay, but if you were to lend me your opinion on a person and your reasons for why you believe you're a higher standardization than that particular person, okay, you'd have to categorize that opinion for me. You'd have to categorize it into linguistics, phenomenology, ontology, and all the variables, all the different categories, and show me how you broke them all down and found a different distinction, how you managed to distinguish between you and the other person, and how your distinguishing factors are a higher resolution than their distinguishing factors, so to speak. Okay, so we know people are not using their categorization tool. Okay, the monarchies, the Vaticans, all the isms, the sexisms, is because people don't categorize people properly. Okay, so they can all categorize their families and they can categorize certain things. We categorize, we have different categories for family and work and so on, and foods we eat. We have different categories. People eat healthy categories of food and so on. So people use categories, but they don't categorize the fact that they categorize. And this is where this is what I am bringing to the table. I'm going into these, people understand, they've heard the word category or evaluation or navigation 1,000 times, they've heard that concept used many times. But I'm getting into the gut of it. I'm getting into the phenomenology of these concepts and actually letting you know that these are modes in the mind. It's the mind that categorizes. And if people have incorrect opinions, it's because they haven't categorized the situation in the correct manner. Correct. And therefore it's led to genocide.
Yeah. So how would you categorize human beings?
Well, like I said, I will categorize us as a thing that can categorize. I will categorize us as a thing that can evaluate. I can categorize us as a thing that can navigate, and you can categorize and navigate that, evaluate it. Okay, we can all concur on that. I categorize our species in, like I said, in different categories. We're a biological category, a linguistical category. Okay, we have a phenomenological category, metaphysical category, and so on, physical category. So I'm categorizing people. We have a genetic category, okay? A genetic category that allows us all to develop from the womb up into transcendental entities. We categorize them as transcendental, okay? So there's many different categories. So in that category, I see the magnitude of the human being, okay? And I don't know what that category is yet, okay? All I can do is extend and expand into it and evaluate it and keep going until I know it, until I can ground it with a first order predicate, okay? But until such time, all I can say with any kind of certainty is that I'm a seeing eye that categorizes and, evaluates, okay? And there's humility in that, and there's humility in the giganticness of that, because this is what we are. We're a complex seeing eye that hasn't found itself and grounded itself in this physical realm as yet. So so we're out on that one. We shouldn't be calling anything about man, okay? Until we know what we are personally, and then collectively, and so on.
Is organization.
Yeah, to organize. Well, what do you think organization is?
So for instance, if I look at this house, yes, there are different zones within the house. There's the kitchen zone, there's the living room zone, there's the bathroom zone, there's the clothes zone, there's the bed zone. And what I do, I know exactly what belongs in each one of those zones. And so if things get placed and taken out of one of the zones and put into another zone, the first thing I do in the morning is I replace it into the zone that it belongs to, right? So for me, that's organizing. Yeah. It's putting that item back into the appropriate zone.
Okay, so we all organize, okay? We organize our lives based on that, what you just said, and that's correct. But that's because we have an organizational mode, our ability to organize, okay? And we have to reorganize ourselves. That's effectively what we're saying, okay? We're out of order, okay? Because we haven't organized ourselves in the correct way. We've been organized around corrupt establishments, corrupt institutions, and they've been ordered up a certain way. They've been organized a certain way, okay? And we can see that because we can place our mind into the organization of them. Okay, it's kind of a mental acumen and a mental ability to sit into organization because we can organize. Like we can't, if we extend and expand into the cell, the structure of the cell, and see it as an organizing organism in its own right, an autopoietic organism, and it's organizing, okay? We only know it's organizing because we have the ability to organize around the fact that it's organizing, because we can move with the motion of organization, okay? So we could think of nature as something that it's organized, okay? It's, there's an organization.
You have a completely different view.
Absolutely, but this is the system.
You mean like an organism?
Well, an organism
yes.
is organized, okay? We know it's an organism, and we know it's organized because we have the mode of mind to allow us to impregnate the idea, to sort of penetrate and incorporate, to sit in and absorb the idea of organization, okay? So we can think, okay, systemically with the fact that the world is an organizational setup. It's all organized, okay? The whole ecosystem, everything is organized to work, in conjunction with everything else, okay? We're all part of it. Now we can see that. Why can we see that? Because we have the ability to organize around its organizational factors, okay? So we have to learn to reorganize the mind, to recalibrate the mind. Our species, people organize their days, like you said, people organize their lives. They get to other countries by organizing a ticket for the airport and a train ticket and getting to the airport. They organize their day and they navigate and evaluate their way there, okay? So they organize themselves. But I want to take it right back that we can organize ourselves around chemistry, or we can organize ourselves around how disorganized capitalism is, or how disorganized the establishments are, because we can organize the framework, okay? And we can see that things are disorganized because we know how to organize them up the correct way, okay? So it's a very important tool to understand that we can reorganize ourselves, and we must reorganize ourselves, okay, around all the organizational factors of nature, okay, if you will. Anyway, the point being is it's a mode of the mind.
So is it more than, when I described organization, I was saying, so I divide the house up into categories, kitchen, bedroom, etc. Yeah. And then I say, this belongs in this category. So I'm organizing it by putting certain items into the correct category, right? Yes. So there's an action. So organizing in that sense seems like putting things into their correct place, right? But I feel like you're saying something slightly different. What you're saying is that an organism has its own organization. Yeah. It has its own way. I mean, an organism functions because it has its own organization. The way that each one of our
all the interplays give it its organization. Let's just say that. Yeah.
So are you saying that organization, in your view, though, is to understand the structure of an organism?
No. I gave the structures of an organism as an example to relay the fact that the only reason we can understand that it has an organizational framework is because we can place our minds around it. We can see the cell, okay, or any system, capitalism, around it, how we infer it to be, all its interplays, all its outcomes, inputs and outputs, yeah? So we organize around that. We have an organizational tool. All the modes I'm referring to are all about the mind. I just give examples, like I said, of capitalism and monarchy and all the different isms. But like you said yourself, so you were pointing out the fact that we do organize things, and we also, all the modes work in conjunction with every other mode, so we organize and we categorize. Okay, when we're organizing our mind around the cell, we categorize the cell in relation to how it's, organized up, how it's ordered up, so to speak, yeah? So the people are organizing themselves every day. So I just want to strip it right back, because this is what it's all about, stripping it right back to the gut of phenomenology of what's going on in the mind. We have an organizational tool. I'm trying to lend light to that fact because that's a driving tool. It's like saying you're getting into a car to drive down the motorway, and I keep saying, but you have a steering wheel, and nobody wants to listen to me. People say, no, I want to believe in the capitalist system, and I want to drive down the road without a steering wheel. And I'm saying, no. Place yourself in your own driving seat and realize you can navigate, you can evaluate, you can circumnavigate. You have the ability to organize, okay? Now, if nature is organized up as A, B, C, D, all we have to do is organize our minds around the axioms of A, B, C, D to be in the axiomatic position of what is right. Okay, and if we look at all frameworks throughout history where there has been chaos, it's because it's always organized up the wrong way. Nazism was an organization. And what was it organized around? Hierarchy and oppression. Okay? Control, fascism, organized around the tenets of what the elite wanted, a corrupt organization, and so on. So we only know that, like I said, because we have the ability to understand organization, to literally move into the motion of organization. It's a phenomenal tool. Like I said, it's a phenomenal tool. And that's what I'm trying to lend light to. I'm trying to give light to all the templates, all the modes of the mind, so I can build, these are the architectonics, because I'm slowly building to the architecture of the mind, and then I'm going to show you what consciousness is about.
Yeah. Brilliant. Yeah, we are drilling down into each one of them, but maybe
at the end
we can maybe look at how they constellate together.
Yeah, how they absolutely, as a total constellation. Yeah. That's the whole idea, as a total constellation. Then I'll show you consciousness in a new light. And this is systemizing consciousness. Okay, I'm showing you the systemic modes of the mind.
Mentioned is unification.
Okay, yeah, to unify. Well, we are in a constant state of wanting to unify with things, okay? Unification, like I said, is another mode of the mind, another piston in the metaphysical engine of the mind, okay? Unification is God. Unification, the idea of the collective spirit, okay? That's a unified collectivism. Collectivism is a unified, it's circled, it's complete, okay?
It's a tautology.
Yeah, it's a tautology, it's a complete set, yeah? Contained within itself, that only produces its own end, tautology. So the fact that we want a unified field theory. Why? Because we understand, by organizing our minds around the organizational variables of nature and putting it into all its set categories, we realize that it's all of one unit, okay? So we want to know what the governing order of that one unit is. Okay, that's the unified field theory. What is that one? What's the algorithm that drives it all forward? Okay, I believe it's the engine. The engine, I'm showing you the template, which will lead to the algorithm of the mind, which will lead to us traveling on the inside channels of nature, if you will. Anyway, yeah. So, but anyway, we understand the unified field theory. That's because we understand unity to unification. Okay, we understand unification, so that allows us to, set our mind along, say, revolutionary tracks. Revolutions are about unifying the species. In relation to the tyranny of the establishment, okay, we say this is not unifying. So we unite, which is unification, to unite, a united front, okay, to confront the ununited front, that which causes division. Okay, we understand the concept of division because we are wired with the mode of unification. To unify, division is dividing a unit. Okay, 1 plus 1 equals 2. 1 aggregated into 2 is dividing the unit of 1. Okay, so the unit of 1 is a unit. Okay, if you wanted 2, you aggregate 1. There is no 2, so you aggregate 1, so you divide 1. Okay, so you divide.
You mean to disaggregate 1?
Yeah, to disaggregate. Yeah, well,
you disaggregate 1.
You disaggregate 1. Yeah, that's where 2 comes from. 1 aggregated to 10 is 10. Okay, so my point is, I'm just showing you we divide it, so we divide unit. Okay, so we.
I love it how you completely flip that on its back.
Yeah. So anyway,
no, because when you describe it, you usually say so. The paradigm isn't. I don't remember what the other paradigm is, but you say it's one aggregated. No, infinity aggregated to the point of 1.
Oh yes. When people often say it's infinity plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 ad infinitum, that's the incorrect axiom. It's actually 1 aggregated to the point of infinity. Okay, meaning you take 1 apple and chop it up 1 trillion times. That's still 1 apple. All you've done is create the aggregates of the apple. Okay, the molecules are millions of molecules of the apple, which make up 1 apple. Okay, so the unit divide. Now we understand unit and we understand it's divided because we have the mode of unification built in. This is why we can organize our minds around such complex notion as the unified field theory, because of our ability to unify. And if we didn't have the mode to unify and to organize, okay, we couldn't organize our species up in the correct manner. We couldn't find a united front with anything. Okay, and we are finding united fronts, and we found united fronts. We're rising as a species because we are united on a monumental front. We want our rainforest saved. Okay, we're united around that. We want clean air. We're united around that. We want all children respected. The sovereignty of all children to be upheld to the highest order. Amen. I'm united around that because I'm unified around that, and my mind is unified around that, and your mind is unified, and most people on the planet are unified, and the only ones who are not unified with it are the narcissists, because they don't understand empathy with us, so they see the world through a crooked lens, etc., etc. Fuck them, we won't go into that. But anyway, unification, the mode of the mind. We can all unify. Nazism is not unified, racism is not unified, monarchy is not unified, capitalism is not unified. I'm unified with that position. I take it you are too, so we are joined on a united front. And if billions were listening right now, they'd all be united with that unit, okay? Because we can all unify. That gives us dominance, okay? We can unify the correct denomination for our species and move forward into God. So
great.
Yeah.
So the hippies were right. We are oneness.
The hippies were right. We are oneness, and so are the mathematicians.
The hippies and the mathematicians had it right.
Yeah.
Identification.
Identity. That's been a mindfuck, hasn't it, for millennia? What to identify with? That's fundamentally what the question, the premise. What are we to identify with? Okay. I'm not going to identify with hierarchy or the caste system. I'm not going to identify with racism or fascism. I don't identify with that. So what does it mean to have an identity? Well, we have one of the modes of the mind is our ability to identify things. Okay, that's why we have the notion identity in the first place. We're trying to identify what our species is. We're trying to identify meaning, purpose. What is our purpose? We're trying to give it an identity framework.
What does identify actually mean? Sorry to interrupt. It's just like, does it mean at like a fundamental level to understand what you are, to understand what it is?
To understand what we are, to understand what it is by identifying with certain factors of it. Okay, if we look at the apple again, okay, when we start to identify it, we go into its molecule because they are some of its identifying factors. It goes down to the quantum realm. That is part of its identifying factors. So when we look,
there's a helpful term here that, from my work, I've heard is indicators.
Yeah, indicators. Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's that.
Something
it's
indicates
an indicator.
This. Yes,
so
yes,
we can talk about statistics as indicators of certain things. So the indicators come from the identity of the thing, I think.
Yeah, indicators. We can say indicators, but we need to break it down further. We need to break it into categories. Okay, so I identify with certain categories of the mind and of the body: biology, physics, transcendental, and so on. And because I can identify with that when I break down what I am, I relay that to you through the empathic lens, and I organise my mind around other people and I realise, wow, they're made up of the same categories. So we all identify with the fact that we're a single species. That's why we can identify with that. I'm just breaking down why we do identify with one another. We're not hedgehogs. We're not, tigers. We're not apples. We're the human species, okay? So we can all identify with being human. Okay, so that's one identity factor. But when we start to create subcategories, solipsistic categories, if you like, of humans, Nazism and, Russian and American and English and Irish and Chinese and all these different subcategories of human, okay? we lose ourselves in that quagmire, all these identity factors, okay, because they don't give us our true identity, okay. We're lost in there. The Muslims have a different identity than the Christians and so on, and the Jews have a different identity and so on and so on. The Nazis clearly had a different identity than the Jewish identity and so on. So we have to understand identity. What are we actually identifying with? So the fact is, I cannot identify body. Okay, let's start there, okay. Body merely subsists. It's an extension of a first order field, a metaphysical field. I truly believe that. We're an extension of something. We didn't cause ourselves to come into being. We exist on the back of something else, therefore we subsist, okay? Now I can't predicate the body, okay? When I organize my mind around the body, okay, and look at all its organizational factors, all of them break down to the quantum realm, okay? So I can't premise body, okay? I know there's a body of sorts there, but I can't premise it, so I can't say I am of body because I just can't identify with it. Now I can identify it in a dissipating field. In a field, I'm dissipating, we're dissipating right now, and I can identify with that. So something in my mind can identify with that great tract of knowledge that I'm dissipating as we speak. And you can't place yourself in a wave and say, here I am, okay? So it's the incorrect premise to say, I am, I live, I die, because I'm premising I, and I can't premise I. But what I can look at, okay, so I can't identify myself in relation to body and music, because you need an ear for music and there is no body, and so on and so on. And taste, you need a tongue, you need taste buds, but there is no body. So these are just sort of, second order identity factors, if you will. But let's look at the first order identity factors. I can
indicators,
yeah.
factors.
So I can what is being indicated. So what indications am I picking up? Okay. So I can identify with the fact that I have an identifying mode in my mind that wants to identify itself. Okay. I want to identify, and I can identify, I have modes within the mind, one that organizes, one that evaluates, one that navigates, one that extends, one that circumnavigates, yeah, expands, scope and scale. I can identify that I categorize, okay? I can identify all these fields, these modes in the mind, and I can kind of look at them through, when I bring them all into one set constellation, they all work together in conjunction of each other, and they allow me to see the world systemically. I can identify with that. So all you and I can actually say on this day is we can identify with the fact that we have something in our head that wants to identify itself. Okay, and we can't jump forward from that. Okay, you can't say I am male, I am female, I'm Russian, I'm Irish. These are ludicrous. Like we can play with those concepts in a conventional way. When there's a World Cup on and Russia play America, or Brazil play Ireland. We can shout for the teams we want, and we can like the different. Each culture has its own idiosyncratic package, if you like, and beauty. That's what I'm saying.
Each culture has its own beauty.
But that's not a measurement of what our species is. That's just our species colouring itself in, if you will. Okay, for good and bad. When we get down to the fundamentals, the elementary variables of what we are, the main indicators, okay, we break down to categories, we break down to cells, to molecules, to genetic coding, we break down, okay. This gives us a foundation we can all identify with this is high resolution, football and music and sports, that's all low resolution, okay, about identity, yeah. But this is a high resolution way of looking at our species, okay. And in that resolution, in that whole field, there's a tool inside it, a conscious tool, okay, that's trying to identify itself. And like I said, that's what we are. You can't identify with anything else. This is what we are. This is first order identity. And I want to know how all these modes work together, so I can understand, in a more refined way what we are and what consciousness is actually becoming.
Go back to identity and identification.
Yeah. Okay.
Just to say, first of all, that it's a bit of a mindfuck from a human perspective, because
it sure is.
Because they say that when you're born, right, you have no sense of I, of ego, of ego-based I. Yeah. You actually conflate your body with your mother's body.
Yes.
You don't know what your image looks like in the mirror. There's no sense of this is me. This is me.
Yes.
And then somewhere through the process of acculturization, as we raise our children, we are told your name is Carolina. Oh, the name of this entity is Carolina, and that is who I am.
Yes.
Right? And so we conflate our identity with this package.
Yes.
With this ego, this body-based identity.
Yes.
And the mindfuck of humanity, the thing we need to get our head around is that while in some conventional way, perhaps, colloquially, it's useful to think of ourselves as being this identity, as in this identity.
Yes, while we're living in this realm, it has a conventional use. Yeah.
the fact of the matter is that we have an identity which has nothing to do with our physical body.
That's right.
And so I call that the egoless identity.
Yes.
We have an ego-based and an ego-less identity.
And the ego-less, therefore, is a different
Identity.
part of consciousness, and it's a systemic consciousness. It's a systemic consciousness, and this system isn't just about looking for atoms and cracking the atom and cracking the cell and finding the apple and planting the tree. Okay, this system goes beyond the physical world. This system is the ghost in the machine, the ghost in the resolution, and so that's what I'm giving rise to.
Regulation,
yeah. To regulate ourselves, another mode of the mind, our ability to regulate ourselves. In this realm, we regulate ourselves by the rules of the road. Okay, we regulate our lives on a daily basis. People regulate their families around schools, hospitals, regulations. Hospitals follow regulations. Okay, doctors take an oath to follow the regulations and respect the sovereignty of all life. Okay, without bias, prejudice, and so on. Firefighters are regulated, okay? Armies are regulated, okay? And they're regulated to serve the regulations of the establishment, how things are regulated up to make profit and so on. So these are just examples, okay? That the mind is a regulating tool, okay? And so we have the ability to regulate ourselves. So we can regulate ourselves by the correct order of nature, okay? We can, because when something is unregulated, okay, Nazism was unregulated. The establishment, the hierarchical establishment, the corrupt establishment is unregulated. There's no regulation in nature that carries that. Now, let's take it deeper. We are regulated by the variables of biology and chemistry. Okay, we are regulated to need water. Our bodies regulate themselves in relation to temperature. Okay, so when it's cold, I need warmth. Okay, so to deny somebody the regulation that regulates their body is corruption. Okay, so we deny 1 billion people on this planet the right to eat, but their food has to be regulated by food because our biology has regulations, our chemistry has regulations. So
their body has to be regulated.
Our body has to be regulated, and our well-being has to be regulated. So because we can regulate ourselves, we can see all the irregular facts. Okay, it's irregular. Isms are irregular. The establishment is irregular. Capitalism is irregular because it doesn't regulate itself by the regulations of nature. Okay, we're destroying nature. That's not understanding the regulations of nature. Ecosystems are regulated, and we need to be regulated by the governing variables of ecosystems, okay, not destroy them, okay, not cut down our rainforests. We must regulate ourselves by the order of things, okay. So my point being is that we can organize, we can regulate, because we can evaluate by navigating all the variables, all the indicators of each verse that we're looking at, and so on. So it's important, like law is regulated, okay. Law is meant to be regulated, but it's not regulated in the correct manner. So we need to reorganize ourselves around what law is and what law means to the sovereignty of the individual and to the sovereignty of the whole, to the sovereignty of nature, okay. The rainforest has sovereignty, okay, the caterpillar has sovereignty, the ant colony has sovereignty, okay, the whales have sovereignty, humans, our children have sovereignty, and we must regulate ourselves by the correct regulatory factors of each human being, okay. So regulation, fantastic mode, okay. We're blind without all these modes, okay. We can't systemize thought. Consciousness is flat.
So if I were to read back the modes to you, maybe you could think of an example that illustrates how one's connected to the other.
Okay.
So right, we said organization.
Yeah.
Well, maybe categorization.
Yeah.
Organization.
Evaluation.
Identification.
Yeah.
Unification.
Okay.
And regulation.
Okay. So the engine is running and it's kicking with all of these modes. When we're employed in thought, when we're employed in serious thought, okay, categorization, evaluation. So let's look at this. Let's look at two complex fields, and then I'll show you how it relates to humans. Mathematics and science, okay. If you move into the field of mathematics, you're in a state of evaluation. You're navigating all the indications, all the indicating factors, okay. You evaluate, you circumnavigate the perspective, okay. You are trying to unify with the perspective, to find consistency with perspective, concurrence, coherency, and so on. So the modes are in play. You cannot approach the mathematical field unless you can add, multiply modes of the mind, okay? The topological mind, the transpositional mind that transposes itself into all the set positions and all the axioms of mathematics. Okay, so that's given enough light to that. The mode is in play when we approach mathematics, and without this bed of modes, mathematics is actually impossible. Mathematics is a set in the mind. And the mind is organizing itself around reality, and it's writing out certain symbols to denote that all the organizational variables of the mind. How we see the cell, we write it in symbols. How we see quantum, we write it in symbols. The mind is organizing. So that's mathematics, okay? The same applies to science. You can hear how. Once we go into chemistry and biology, okay?
I feel it's slightly different in science.
Well, no, it's not, because it's the same lens, and here's why. Once you go into a cell, into genetics, you evaluate genetics. You navigate yourself by the indicators of genetic. You're in a state of navigation. You're circumnavigating because you want to find completeness, because you want to find...
But I'm just talking about identification, categorization, organization.
Okay.
How are they in play?
Well, once again, identification, categorize... Well, when we're in science, once we're in mathematics, we're categorizing numbers and categories, okay? We're creating categories. When we're in science, we're categorizing it as cell, as molecule. Categorization, we categorize things, okay? So it's in play, and when we categorize, we evaluate. We navigate by the certain organizational variables of each category that we're looking at, and we're trying to identify with each factor. The same in mathematics. So the modes are all in play in conjunction with one another, because we can't we evaluate, we must navigate, we must extend, we must expand, okay? We must organize, we must integrate. We integrate with mathematics. 1 + 1 = 2 is an integration. We've evaluated and navigated by the two aggregates and arrived at the concurrence of 2. Therefore, all the modes are in play. Now, when it comes to human beings, this bed has to be applied to our field too. When we have to consider what we are and how we live and what meaning is who we are in relation to what and so on, we move into categories. We evaluate those categories because we navigate the mind by them and so on, and we integrate with them to find unification, okay? And we give concurrence to that as a species. So this I that applies itself to science in this manner, this is Kantian, and it applies itself to mathematics in this manner, and it also applies itself to practical knowledge in this manner, as you can see. You can concur on that because you can unify with it, because you've navigated what I've just said by evaluating it and adding it onto your own subjective framework and concurring. So it's all in play as we speak. Yeah, and the reason the world is out of order, it's disordered up the wrong way because it doesn't understand these tools which have been necessitated through it for 1 billion years. Chimps navigate and evaluate. Early man, Neanderthal, Homo erectus, navigated, evaluated, building spears, evaluate, taking down a mammoth, evaluate, navigate, organize around it. These tools have always been present in us, and we have grown to know ourselves around them.
Okay, so my take on this, just to summarize that, is that we intuit and then begin to evaluate in order that we can identify and then categorize in order to find an organization and ultimately to be able to find the ultimate organization, which is a unification.
Yes, you could say it like that. Okay.